Gaines would like a game. I think it's only fair to grant him that. And by the way, Kavita, anybody who is a consistent supporter would like a speedrun game, I generally accommodate it. C4, English defense. Now, there are many ways to face the English defense. Since we play the Queen's Gambit declined against d4 in the speedrun, let's play e6. And those of you who play the Queen's Gambit declined as your main opening, this is how you want to meet c4. You don't even really have to study it separately, because e6 virtually guarantees a transition into Queen's Gambit decline, because you're going to play d5 on the next move. Makes sense? So d4, d5, and we have transposed into Queen's Gambit declined. Now, you don't have to play e6. Of course, the principled move is e5, and that leads to the reverse Sicilian structure, which has been very extensively studied and which you've seen in my Blitz games. Okay, knight c3, 1,000 bits from Procy. Thank you. Okay, knight f6. Let's play it traditionally. Let's play the traditional Queen's Gambit declined. Bishop g5, and now those of you who have paid particularly careful attention know that I like a tricky move, knight b to d7, which is the main line, and it also sets a trap. Like I've told you guys, I've seen very good players fall into this trap, and that trap happens after cd, ed, knight takes d5. That loses a piece, and I'll show that after the game one more time, but take my word for it. Queen c2. Already, I think, inaccurate. Already inaccurate. And we have multiple ways that, well, not really inaccurate. I mean, Queen c2 is okay, but I think the better, more accurate way of playing is either e3 or knight f3, focusing on development. When I see the move Queen c2, the first thing I notice is that it leaves the d4 pawn unattended. And if you know anything about these Queen's Gambit declined structures, you'll know that one of Black's main ideas in such positions is to do what? And we're going to play this move here. It's a very principled move. It's a little bit more aggressive than how we've handled these positions in the speedrun, but we're going to give it a shot. Yeah, the move is c5, creating the pawn square. And hopefully everybody can see the drawback of Queen c2, which is that, I mean, we're threatening c takes d4. And more importantly, if white plays d takes c5, we are not just going to passively recapture. What would we have done in response to d takes c5? What would we have done? Again, exploiting the drawback of Queen c2. We would have played d4. We would have advanced our pawn to d4. Exactly. Rook d1. Now, here we want to play much in the same vein, right? The fact that Gaines senses that d4 needs to be defended, but he doesn't defend it with the right piece. The rook is not a good defender. How should we proceed? How should we proceed? So, a lot of you guys are thinking, okay, let's reinforce the attack on the d4 pawn. But that's not the approach that I would take here. What I would say is we can take d4. We force the rook onto d4, and then we can attack that rook while developing our other pieces. And as you'll see, that actually leads to... Okay, never mind. Knight b5. Whoa. Knight b5. That's actually probably the best move, which is kind of funny. I think rook takes d4 would have landed white in serious trouble. Okay, now we got to be very careful. What should you notice when you look at this position? Well, one thing you should notice is the c7 square. Right? You have to be very careful not to leave that square unattended. If you play queen a5 check here, which I know entices some of you, then after bishop d2, black is in a bit of trouble. We can't really take a2 because then we have allowed knight c7 check, right? So the best approach here is a different development move, and some of you have named it. I like bishop b4, developing the bishop with check. Essentially forcing white's bishop back to d2. Okay, now we have another choice. This is a very complex position, actually, as it turns out. We can do several different things here. So some of you are proposing a5, which I understand the appeal of that, but after bishop takes, a takes, notice that white will have knight d6 check. I don't want to allow that check. So we can take the bishop. First of all, we can take the bishop. But the other thing that we can do is drop this bishop back, let's say, just to e7. And essentially say that we have gotten white's bishop onto a very awkward square. right? We can play bishop e7, and then we can castle, and perhaps that's not the absolute most that we can squeeze out of the position, but it's something. But if we're already playing bishop e7, if we're already deciding to move the bishop back, how should we do it? What is the nicest square for the bishop along this diagonal? Well, if we're already moving the bishop back, we might as well make it harder for white to recapture d4, right? Is that logical? So let's play bishop c5. Let's play bishop c5, and at least let's try to harass him a little bit. Knight f3. Okay. So now the approach should be the following. What I want you guys to see is that the king is out of squares. That's the first thing that I notice when I look at this position, is that the king is out of squares. Okay. The second thing that I notice is that I'm noticing mating patterns on f2. So, for instance, if we had a knight on e4 and the pawn disappeared from d4, we would be threatening checkmate. So immediately I'm thinking of, and we're going to play the move knight e4, which, believe it or not, indirectly defends against knight b takes d4. What will we do if Gaines takes on d4 with a knight? And this is not unlikely to happen. Not entirely unlikely. We will go e5. We will go e5, chase the knight away, and white will end up losing that knight because he can't move it. He'll get checkmated on f2. Now, again, I'm not explaining everything super clearly here. I'm expecting some of you to be confused. This is just a complicated position. There's no way around it. So I won't be able to capture absolutely everything, but I'm doing my best. b4, excellent move, though, by Gaines. Excellent move. And this forces us to move our bishop. Yeah, a lot of you see d3, which we could consider, but after d3, white plays e takes d3. Although, no, we can play d3. No, we can play d3. I missed a detail there that I just saw. Spicy game for sure. Queen d3, bishop f2 is checkmate. So white basically has to play... Okay, well, that's unfortunate, but I'm going to go ahead and checkmate him. Whoops. All right, Gaines. I mean, you're already in trouble here, but I actually think white is in much better shape than people realize after e takes d3. So this was tunnel vision, right? This is tunnel vision. I think you spotted the queen. And again, if I may be so forward, I think the reason this happens is still fear of your queen being attacked. And this is something to work on for everybody like below 1300. It's like when your opponent attacks your queen, the first thing you need to do is not panic. The second thing you need to do is to remind yourself not to tunnel vision that attack, to see what else your opponent's move does. Right? E takes d3 is the move. Bishop takes f2, king e2. And this is actually a interesting scenario. The knight is hanging, and if we simply move the knight, then we lose the bishop. So what does black have to do here? What does black have to do here? Knight takes d2, exactly. Okay, but here, white can recapture with the queen. Now the bishop is hanging. We have to move it. We should probably move it back to b6. And now, what kind of moves can white make here? Who can propose a nice move here for white? No, it's okay. I mean, you actually played not so badly in the opening. This is interesting. Lots to analyze here. Knight d6 check. Now, this move is not that scary for black because white's pieces are so passive that a move like king f8 is totally fine for black. It's not like black's king is in any danger here. Notice that. Black's king is in no danger at all in f8. But the game goes on. I mean, queen f4 is an attempt. Although black can simply block the mate threat with queen f6, and ultimately black is up a pawn here. White's king is in shambles, so we are much better, but the game goes on. The game goes on. No, b4 was very good. It was really the only move. But there's a lot to unpack in the first couple of moves. So, first of all, the trap is, of course, and I'm sure everybody knows this, knight takes d5. I've shown this before. Okay, I don't like the phrase everybody knows it because, you know, I know some of you don't, and that's okay. But black plays knight takes d5. Oh, blunders the queen. No, it doesn't. Bishop b4 check. This trap exists in many different variations, by the way. Not just here. It exists across the board. White is forced to play queen d2. And when the smoke clears, black is up a piece. Actually, my brother caught a 1500 on this trap. So, something to file away. But Gaines, queen c2 is inaccurate because you leave the d4 pawn unattended. And the clinical move here for white is e3. The theoretical move, I should say, is e3. e3 and then quickly developing your pieces. I have nothing to apologize for. You gave us a lot to analyze. And then quickly developing the king side. This is mainline theory. After queen c2, c5, the situation gets very spicy. Now, I'm sure that there is some theory here, so you guys, especially YouTube people, can run Stockfish, and probably Stockfish will laugh at me, but I think c5 is a very unpleasant move to face. Now, who can tell me what the most solid way of defending d4 is? What is the most solid way of defending this pawn? And generally, when I say solid and defense in the same sentence, you should be thinking, I want to defend a pawn with another pawn. Right? Defending a pawn with another pawn is going to guarantee at least a decently solid position. And so I think e3 is the wisest move here. I think e3 is the wisest move. cd, ed, and white is okay. White is okay. This potentially will reach an IQP structure. I mean, if black plays dc, this is an isolated queen pawn structure, which is totally fine for white. In fact, we've probably transposed into some sort of a Nimzo-Indian type structure. I would not have taken on c4 in one fell swoop, though. We would have probably gone bishop e7 and waited for white to move the bishop to take on c4. You know that trick. You wait for white to develop the light square bishop so that you make him lose a tempo. But it's a game. And I see that 5 games continued bishop e7 here straight away. So some people didn't even take on d4. White is totally fine here. Does that make sense? Rook d1 is a conceptual mistake. Defending the pawn with the rook is rarely a good idea. And gains, I'm sure you saw that. After rook takes d4, black already has tactics. Black already has tactics. Yeah, the position's pretty much equal there. What should black do? So bishop c5. Rook moves back, and those of you with a keen tactical eye should immediately spot a very, very nasty tactical pattern. Bishop takes f2. This is as old as the hills. Knight g4, queen takes g5. Knight is coming to e3. This is a particularly bad version of walking into this tactic. This is crap. So after bishop c5, it's already major trouble for white. And so I think knight b5 is very good gains. I think this is a great move. And here things get quite complicated. So you can definitely analyze this with an engine, and I'm sure I didn't play this accurately. But bishop b4 was an intuitive move, just developing with tempo. Bishop d2. And now a lot of you were proposing a5. But, okay, takes, knight d6 is one thing that it allows, although simply king e7 and black is fine. Although simply king e7 and black is more than fine. White is completely undeveloped here. But white also can kind of ignore this and play knight takes d4. Right? So a5 is one possibility. But another possibility for black is to trade on d2. And then, well, if rook takes d2, maybe knight e4 is the most ambitious approach. So there's multiple ways to play this. But after bishop c5, I was hoping that you wouldn't find this gains, and you didn't. And this is a bit of an opportunistic move. How should white continue here? And the first thing you should think about is getting this bishop away from c5 so that you can take d4 and restore material equality. b4 is correct. Now, here we would have gone bishop e7, and inducing b4, I think in this particular instance, favors black. Why is that conceptually? Because I think white is so undeveloped and so potentially overextended that pushing out further pawns creates more weaknesses that are easier to attack, if that makes sense. But after knight takes d4, we would have castled. You can play e3, and you're starting to stabilize the position, quickly developing the kingside pieces, and I think white is still fine. By playing knight f3 and procrastinating with this, you allowed knight e4, and now it's kind of too late to take the pawn because of e5. And if you try c takes d5, last question for you guys, what should black do here? Should we take on d4 immediately, or should we throw something in first? You know, not stupid. I mean, this is what you should do. You just did it in a slightly inferior version. Knight takes d2 first, very important, and then we take the knight. And yeah, it's unfortunate that you blundered here, but it's also a very, very tense position, and it happens. And I think your main mistake really was actually rook d1. I think this is where, you know, the crap hit the fan after c takes d4, because here it got very, very hard to play for white. So one of the takeaways here is that defending a pawn with another pawn is the most solid way of defending anything with a pawn is the most solid way of doing that. So there's an inverse relationship between piece value and its ability to defend another piece. Not necessarily intuitive. You think, let me defend it with a queen. But again, the queen is the worst defender of other pieces precisely because it is the most valuable piece, because it's vulnerable. If you think about it, it starts making sense. Okay. Short game, but I think there was a lot there to unpack, so hopefully you enjoyed. Gains, thank you for all the subs and the support. Kavita, you got dibs on the next speedrun. But if it's okay, I'm gonna go to bed because I'm exhausted, and tomorrow's another day of commentary. So 9 a.m. tomorrow for Rapid Day 2. Or actually not Day 2, just Rapid Playoffs. It's going to be a fun one. Aroni and Nakamura, it's going to be close. I think they might even go down a blitz. So definitely don't want to miss it. I'm going to rate Canty, guys. I'm going to rate Canty. Thank you so much for the support. Good stream today. And hopefully see you tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out. Good night, everybody. See you in the morning.